Well, hey there, fellow streakers. How's everyone doing? Hopefully
morning.
fantastic. How you doing, James?
I'm doing good. We have new microphones.
I know, isn't it so cool?
I don't know if we could tell people that, but
we can.
they're pretty cool.
They are pretty cool. We're kind of getting them all zoned in. So we may have a little bit of an adjustment as we go along here. We've been watching and seeing, making sure our levels sound good and everything else. But the microphones are pretty cool.
They are pretty cool. I feel special
How come you feel special?
because they look cool.
They look cool. We look like real broadcasters now.
Yep, it's fun.
I mean, as our audience has grown, as people have started to tune in, we felt like we need to upgrade the equipment just a little bit as well, which has been a lot of fun.
You've been wanting to upgrade the equipment forever.
Well, of course, but I mean, it's a good excuse.
It's always a good excuse. This was fun.
This has been a blast. You know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about right away, well, first of all, if you haven't had a chance to go out and buy the book yet, it's out there and we've been getting good reviews. We've had several reviews, almost 20 reviews, all 5 stars. And it's been really great. I think people are starting to get a lot out of it.
I think so too. And it's important too. The book really brings everything together. So if you have questions or if you're excited to get started, get the book, read the book. It helps to kind of put everything together.
It really does. I mean, from front to back. And it is interesting because if you get through the first, 4 chapters, you're going to learn the laws of streaking.
Right. And you're going to want to get started.
Exactly.
But you need to read the whole thing because there's a lot that we learned as we went that will help.
Where it really gets good is in chapter 8 or 6 or 7 is where it starts to pick up. And then chapter 8 through the end, there's quite a bit. In fact, not that there are people, there may be people out there, but there may be someone out there who has already broken a streak. In fact, we know that there has one of our streakers,
Yes.
right?
So I had,
And there's a chapter in the book about broken streaks.
About broken streaks. And this was a really good situation where I had a streaker talk to me and say, I had the worst thing happen. So she had fallen asleep before she intended to fall asleep.
Uh-huh. You know, one of the things I've noticed, I'm just going to riff in for a second here, is there are a lot of people who will call you or talk to you about their streaks and just what they've been, some of the different things that they've been struggling with or having a difficult time with, or their successes.
Right.
Have you? And not as many will reach out to me like on the phone. I mean, you'll have these personal conversations with people, and I'll have conversations that are more, I guess, via email or any of those. As far as that's concerned, it's just interesting to me how you have a little bit more interpersonal communication, and mine is personal but not necessarily interpersonal.
Right.
And if that makes any sense whatsoever.
So mine was a phone call.
Yes.
And she's like, I broke 5 of my streaks.
Ooh.
5 of
Ouch.
them. She goes, I've listened to your podcast and you've talked about breaking one. And I could see that, but she goes, what do? I broke all 5 of them. So she fell asleep before she intended to.
Uh-huh.
And woke up the next morning and was like, I lost. And she said my longest streak was 180 days.
Ooh.
And so she just was
a
calling.
3-digit streak. That's when you know you really feel that.
You feel it. So she was calling and saying, I'm like, she's kind of like, I'm in the depths of despair. What do I do to have broken all 5 of these streaks?
How did you feel at that minute? Because you've broken streaks before.
I have. I've broken streaks
Have
before.
you
I haven't
broken a
had that
triple-digit streak?
experience where I broke that many at once. So that was
5.
I felt for her. Yeah, I've had several. I've had 3 streaks that I've had to start over that were in that length for different reasons. That's part of why it's important to keep reading the book, is because it talks about kind of these different things when these things happen.
It talks about the journey that we had in when we experienced that. Because it will. And it is amazing to think that even though it's laughably simple,
I know, you
still have the opportunity to break the streak.
Yep. And so she just was like, what should I do? So I was thinking about it and I thought, well, first thing when something like this happens is just, be sad. It's hard. And so it's okay to mourn that for a little bit and just be like, wow.
Now,
that was really hard.
Some people might disagree with you and say, like, in other words, we're being too rigid in the broken streak. In other words, well, you did that for 180 days. You should be really happy. So why is it that you're sad? What is it about it that you're mourning?
So
Why
that
are
was
you
going to be
mourning
my
that?
second thing, is to look at it and think, hey, look at how long. Why are you mourning? Because I think for this situation, the mourning comes in the fact, and probably most of them, is that the break was an unintentional, where you're just like, wow, I had been so consistent and doing these things, and I missed that day. And you're right. Some people would be like, okay, you're focusing on the wrong thing. But there is something to be said about being sad for a second,
Yeah.
that level of consistency was broken for that moment.
Right.
But then the second thing was exactly what you said, to look back and think, okay, you've been doing it for 180 days. So the third thing I said to her is, I said, well, this is a great opportunity to evaluate.
Right.
So you've been doing these, you had these 5 streaks in your life. Take a minute and look and think, okay, was that bringing value? Was what I was doing in those 5 streaks?
So you offered it to her as a way to evaluate, really looking at it and saying, those things that I've been doing, have they really been something that I want to continue to do?
Right.
Are they valuable enough to start over?
Are they valuable enough to start over? And for me, most of my experience has been this being able to look back and think, okay, for that period of time, for that 180 days, I was consistent in that thing that is important to me.
Yeah.
And she actually didn't share what any of the streaks were.
Oh, you didn't know?
I don't know what they are.
You don't know what they were?
No.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm wondering if I should have asked more specifically, but so I don't know what her streaks are, but it was a good conversation to look at it and say, do you feel good about having had those things, having been able to do those things? And if so, then you can look at it and say, okay, I was successful and I want to keep being successful. And that's really what this is all about. I think it's super important to recognize that the streak is a tool to help you to become who you want to be. Let's not get too caught up in the tool, and
Right.
recognize that it's a tool to
but
help
be
you.
true to the tool.
Be true to the tool.
In other words, because there's other programs out there, other apps out there. So we have our streaking app that basically, when a streak is lost, it's lost, and you start over.
You start over.
There's other apps out there, like there's one out there called Streaks, and there's other habit trackers and things like that are just like, well, you've done a lot of it, and let's focus on that. But the reason why
And they do it, they're like, well, you've done 80% of the time.
Right, exactly.
And the reason that we, for ourselves, as we were going through this journey, kind of were like, no, it has to be 100% of the time.
It
It's because-
either is a streak or it's not.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just basically what we looked at it. But to your point, not to get caught up in the fact that, okay, the streak was broken and I did that thing for 180 days, whatever that thing that was adding value to my life. Do I want to start it over and see if I can go past 180 days? Because that's really the next question.
Well, and that's the thing, is it's like you were doing that thing consistently, and that's why you started the streak in the first place, is because you wanted to be a part of your life.
Is the intentionality of that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Is that you are choosing it intentionally to be that way.
So when you
That
start
is
over,
pretty cool.
you're doing the
Right.
same thing. You're like, no, I am choosing intentionally to have this be a part of my life. So the last thing I told her to do that I did when I broke a streak that was really long, that was hard, is that for a long time, I kept the number of days that I had accomplished that streak next to my new record,
Yeah.
so that I could know, like for a little while, I would say, okay, I've been doing it for 10 days plus the 246 that I did before, minus one day in between.
Minus one day in between.
For a little while, to just remind myself that I've been doing this for a long time. I mean,
Now, was that motivational? I mean, did
it
you
was
like that?
for me, because what it did is it kept my focus in the right place. So when you're starting over, your numbers go back small.
Yeah.
You're starting at ones and twos
Starting
and
at ones and
tens and
twos.
11s.
Which
and
brings
that's
up
hard.
a really interesting conversation. We're going to take a little detour here for a second, because I love this part of it. When you start with 1 and 2 and 3, there's no way to get there faster.
Yeah.
And this is something that I love this story that you tell, because when we lived in Colorado, right, our family still lives in Colorado and everything else, we moved to Georgia, and we would travel back to Colorado. And I love the way that you you looked at this, because when we travel back to Colorado, road trip it, there was, I mean, you would look at it and say, there is no way to make this trip any faster.
I know. I would spend hours mapping it and remapping it. And no matter how I calculated that, we could not drive any faster than 21 hours.
Unless I was going like 200 miles an hour, you were driving 200 miles an hour or
which
something
is not
crazy,
safe.
which we
But I
weren't going to do.
remember-
I mean, but just looking at it and saying if we're within, regulation speed, I won't say the speed limit because trust me, I go a little faster than that. Not a lot faster, but if we're in regulation speed, it was going to be 21, 22 hours to Colorado, no matter what.
No matter what. And that was so interesting to me to realize that I couldn't think my way there faster. I couldn't find a better way to get there, that it really was just that far. And I needed to accept that I'm like, okay, that's how far away it is. Unless I hop on a plane, there's no getting there any faster than what
Exactly where your
navigationally
navigation
it says that we can do.
And what was it inside of you that you were trying to solve? What question were you trying to solve when you were looking at it and saying, I want to get there faster? I mean, what was the thing
I don't know,
that
maybe
you're
it's
looking
this
at?
idea that
curious.
if I try harder, I can make what I want to have happen. In other words, I was like, I want to get there faster. And there's got to be a way. If I think harder, if I try harder, if I do something differently, we can get there faster. And the truth of it was, it's just like, nope. It's this far. It's going to stay this far. You can't think it shorter.
It is this. It's going to stay this. It's not going to be anything but this.
It's not going to be anything.
Go ahead.
So then I had to switch from, okay, can we get there faster, to, okay, let's just enjoy this journey. This is part of the journey became part of it instead of just this ultimate get to the destination. And so that was one thing when I was talking to the streaker, that was one thing that she said. And she goes, it's interesting. She goes, I can't do anything to get to where I was any faster.
Yeah.
It's just one day at a time.
Right. And that's where I want to go back to, as far as when you look at it, the metaphor, if you will, that we're going through here is growth does not happen any faster by pulling up the flowers and looking at the roots.
Right. There is a significant element to growth that you can't make it happen faster.
Even though we want to.
We want to.
I want to grow faster. I want to get the experience better. And I may look at other people. We talked a little bit about comparisons in the last podcast or two ago, but I may look at and my growth compared to their growth may seem slower or faster or whatever, but that doesn't matter. That's not what it's. No matter who starts that journey from here to Colorado, it's 21, 22 hours.
Right.
For everyone.
Right.
If you're in a car and you're driving from here to there, now I can switch my mode of transportation, but if we get on the airplane together, guess what? It's 3.5 hours.
Right.
It's 3 to 3.5 hours for everyone that's on that, which is a little bit interesting to consider because, well, what if I want to get there faster? And growth is not about speed, and it's not about intensity. It's about consistency. And like you said, finding the joy in the journey, if you will.
Right.
Now that sounds a little bit odd because how do you find joy in a journey?
I guess that's part of what has been enjoyable for me about streaking, is that that's part of what it helps me do.
Yeah.
So that was the thing when I said, keep the number of days that you had done visible as a constant reminder that you did that was something that for those number of days you were consistent, and you're choosing to continue to be consistent in that. And so that to me is enjoying the journey. It's instead of working so hard to get to the destination, it's more recognizing that I'm growing and changing, and I can't make that happen any faster. I just have to keep doing what I'm doing consistently. And as I do that, I am growing and I am changing, but it's a process and it's a journey.
So a couple of thoughts came to mind as far as looking at the journey and the growing and not being able to do it necessarily any faster. But if I set a goal, will a goal get me there more quickly? In other words, can I accelerate growth because I've got a goal to stretch for something? And I think this is something, just while you're thinking about that, that's something that you and I talked a lot about as far as where does a goal fit in with a streak and a routine and a habit? And knowing that those are 4 different tools in the tool belt why is it important to know that those are 4 different tools in the tool belt? I guess that's the question in the journey to growth. So I've asked a whole bunch of things there, but back to, can I speed up my growth by having a goal?
That's a really good question. I enjoy goals. I like having something to work towards.
Yeah.
To me, by definition, a goal is something that you're stretching for. It's something that is requiring a more concerted effort than what you would give normally.
Yeah.
So either more focus on that particular thing, more energy, more emphasis.
Right.
So what I love about that is that it takes something out of it takes something out of all of the things that you're doing and allows you to give that one thing more focus, more emphasis. It's not something that we can do with everything in our life. So it's difficult to have a goal around everything that we feel we want to improve
do you think
at once.
having a goal around growth, just a general goal around growth, it's very difficult to have a goal around growth?
Well, that's one of the things that's been so interesting. And when you go to when you go to any class or anything that teaches you how to set goals,
Yeah.
a huge part of being able to set a goal is, can
I'm
you measure
smiling
it?
because this is what I do on a regular basis.
I know. That's why it's funny that I'm doing all the talking.
I love it.
But I like that the reason we're talking is because we've talked a lot about this.
Absolutely.
Is that a goal is something that you can measure. And so often there's so many things that we want to be that are difficult to measure.
Mm.
And so that's where I feel like the streak comes in, is this really beautiful symbiotic relationship where a goal to me is something that's going to have a deadline.
Yeah.
Something that at some point I'm going to finish and I'm going to say,
Gonna get it
I
done.
accomplished
It's there.
that
You've
goal.
got it. You've reached it. You've accomplished it. It's there.
Right. Whereas a streak is something more that I want to continue doing, not necessarily a destination, so to speak.
And knowing the difference between the two helps me because I know which one to use in which situation. And I may have like one goal in a year, maybe 2, but streaks, I'll have several streaks that I keep going.
Right. And for me, I like that a goal, I set the goal, I clearly delineate what it is that I want to accomplish in that goal. I set a time frame around it, and then I get to work. A streak allows me to, it's a different place because it's not something I'm stretching for. I kind of turn it the other direction and think, okay, this needs to be something super simple that I can do every day. That's different than a goal. If a goal is super simple, I don't know that's because in essence with a goal, you're trying to put yourself someplace farther than where you are right now. Something,
right?
Someplace you haven't been before, or
right
that you need to get to. Whereas a streak, I feel like, is me just wanting to be consistent in that thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the streak is the soil of growth. It's the place where I can really establish a foundation where I can continue to grow. That's why, so back to our streaker that broke her streaks, as far as that's concerned, really looking at evaluating and saying, are those the things that are helping me to grow? And if so, then I want to continue to do them. I broke 5 and I may start 5 or I may start 4, I may switch things around. However, it's a very conscious action to look at it and say, I'm going to do the things that are going to continue to help me to grow into who I want to be.
Right. So I don't think that, I don't know if I'm going to say this, but breaking a streak is not the end of the world. It's a great opportunity. I know.
Did you just say that out loud?
I know our
Really?
intent is to be consistent.
Right.
And the beautiful thing is that by not breaking a streak, you are putting together and feeling that level of consistency. But when something does happen and a streak is broken, I do think it's a great opportunity to stop for a minute, pause, and look at it and say, look at what I've done. Look at the direction I'm pointing and what I've been able to accomplish with this streak. Is this something I want to keep doing? My guess is that most of the time it's going to be yes, because you didn't set that streak lightly. And you're going to be able to be like, okay, this is something I want to keep doing.
You know what's cool about it as well, as far as not setting the streak lightly, is you did it for 120, 180, 3-digit days. And what that has done as well is, we were talking to another streaker who said, I have not been consistent. I have not been these things in my life, and I finally feel that I am. So when she starts over, she can look at it and say, you know what? I was able to make it 180 days with this. I know what happened. And I remember when I broke my streak that was 245 days. It's a time of reflection to say, what is it that I want to do? How is it that I want to keep this in my life? What am I going to do differently in order to do that?
Right.
And most often it's one of the laws of streaking that I need to refresh and get better on. Usually it's keeping a record.
Right.
It's laughably simple, but I haven't kept the record. And one of the things that I found as well is, there are times where I know that I'm really tired. And so the reason why they're laughably simple is I'll do them just before I go to sleep, whenever that is.
Right.
So that I continue that growth. And I think that that's important.
I think so too.
So the question then is this: when do you know that you have arrived?
When the plane says you've arrived.
That is one of the questions I think I want to consider on our next podcast is there a time where you've arrived? You've arrived at this place where, okay, I've grown in that area. So what do you think? Should we talk about that next time? I don't think we have time for that time.
Not today. But I've loved what we've talked about today with being able to have the confidence to start over when something happens in a streak or 5 streaks are broken at once, to be able to move forward. And then I'm looking forward to talking about when we've arrived.
When we've arrived. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We will next time talk about the arrival, not the movie, but when we've actually arrived. We'd love to hear from you. If there's something that you found about streaking that has inspired, motivated you, or that you'd like to share with us, please do at Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at streakingmastery.com.
Or at Jamie, Jami, at streakingmastery.com.
Until then, go out, grab the book, start your streaks, or download the app, Streaking, and you can find it at the Apple App Store or at Google Play. But go ahead and do that, and you'll start to experience some of this consistency. Until we talk next time,
keep streaking.
Keep streaking.
But I can show you a simpler way. It's the small and simple things that make the life we live worth living. Among the rush, do one push up, become a better you. It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping. You're in a hurry, don't even worry. It's too simple not to do. It's the little things that make a better you. A better you.